If you can play Chopin, I'll marry you on the spot. Those were the words that slipped out of Charlotte Hale's mouth one late evening, her heels clicking against the marble floor of Sonata Records' towering lobby. She didn't even bother to glance up from her phone as she walked past the grand piano, sitting like a relic under the warm pendant lights. Across the room, Daniel Brooks, the night janitor, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with quiet eyes and a calm demeanor, paused mid-polish. His hand rested gently on the piano bench like someone touching something sacred. Charlotte finally looked up. "Did you hear me?" she asked, her tone playfully dismissive. Daniel's eyes met hers. A strange shade of gray-green, they gave away nothing. "I heard you," he replied simply. "But that's not a piece you play on a dare." Her brow arched. So he did know the piece. But instead of answering further, he returned to his task, folding the cloth in his hand with the military precision. Charlotte scoffed quietly and walked away, brushing off the moment as just another after-hours encounter in the building she ruled but never truly belonged to. And yet something about the way he had touched that piano, not like a janitor, but like a man remembering an old friend, stayed with her. That night, as the elevator doors closed behind her, she didn't know it yet, but her casual challenge had just opened the door to a story far bigger than either of them imagined. Charlotte couldn't shake the image, the stillness in Daniel's posture, the way his fingers had lingered just above the keys as if the music still lived in them dormant. The next morning, as sunlight spilled through the towering glass atrium of Sonata Records, Charlotte sipped her espresso, while her assistant Rachel rattled off back-to-back meeting updates. But Charlotte wasn't listening. Her gaze drifted to the piano. A faint smudge, barely visible, shimmered on the lid right where his hand had rested. "Who's the overnight janitor?" she asked, suddenly cutting through Rachel's report. Daniel Brooks. He's been on third shift for about 6 months. Why?" But Charlotte didn't answer. That night, long after the last executive had gone and the building had fallen into its usual hush, Charlotte found herself drawn to the lobby again. Dim lights cast the piano in a warm glow, and there he was, kneeling, polishing the brass pedals with almost reverent care. "I owe you an apology," she said, stepping forward. Daniel didn't flinch. For what? For being condescending. That Chopin comment, it was stupid. He paused. Most people wouldn't remember something like that. "I remember everything," Charlotte replied softly. "That's how I stay ahead." Daniel rose to his full height. "Then you should also remember Chopin isn't a party trick. It's a prayer set to music." Something in the way he said it made her tilt her head, intrigued despite herself. "You talk like someone who used to play," she observed. "I've played a lot of things," he said with a faint, unreadable smile. "Doesn't mean I still do." "Why not?" He looked away, voice low. "Because some things stop belonging to you once they're no longer what you need to survive." A silence fell between them, thick, not awkward, just full. "That sounds like something a man says when he's lost more than he expected to," she said quietly. Daniel studied her face, then gave a single nod. "Good night, Ms. Hale." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Next time I say something reckless, call me out," she said. "I only say things like that when I feel something I don't understand." Daniel looked over his shoulder, his expression softer now. "You understood more than you think," he replied. "You just didn't know how to say it." The next morning arrived with fanfare. Charlotte didn't care for an investor breakfast, 3 media calls, and a crisis involving a delayed shipment of vinyls for a high-profile artist. Still, her mind wasn't on any of it. She kept glancing toward the atrium to that grand piano gleaming under the morning light, like a memory waiting to be replayed. That night, she didn't go straight home. Instead, she stayed late again, not because of work, but because of the silence. The kind that made her forget how long she'd been sitting at her desk. The kind that made her curious. She finally closed her laptop and headed downstairs. The building was asleep. But she wasn't. There he was, again just as before. Daniel Brooks crouched at the piano, cleaning like it mattered more than anything else in the world. She watched him a moment before speaking. "I was wrong about you," she said. He didn't look up. People usually are. "You look at that piano like it once saved your life." This time he paused. Then slowly he stood. Maybe it did. Charlotte stepped closer, her voice softer now. Who are you, Daniel? I'm just a man doing his job, he said. No, she countered. You're a man hiding, and I want to know why. Daniel's eyes didn't dodge, but they seemed to look through time. You ever lose the thing that made the world make sense to you? She nodded slowly. He went on. I trained my whole life to be a pianist. Ate it, breathed it, lived it. Then one spring morning it stopped being enough. What happened? My wife died, he said, voice barely audible. Cancer, 2009. Our daughter Lily was 2. Charlotte's breath caught. I couldn't tour anymore, Daniel continued. Couldn't teach master classes and be there when she woke up crying at night. So I chose her. Charlotte swallowed hard. You gave it all up. I gave up the stage, he corrected, not the music. Then where is it now, she asked. He glanced away. Sometimes. It wakes up. When she laughs. When she sleeps. A pause. But I don't play anymore. Why? Daniel's voice trembled just once. Because when I sit at the keys now, I don't hear what I had. I hear what I lost. Charlotte stood there, the air between them heavy with honesty. Then she whispered, You're wrong. You don't hear what you've lost. You hear who you loved. That's not the same thing. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. The gala wasn't supposed to be a disaster. It was meant to be polished, perfect like everything Charlotte Hale signed her name to. A string quartet, a champagne reception, a flawless evening designed to impress the press and investors alike. The featured pianist flown in from Berlin was Sonata Records' centerpiece for the night. Until his car was hit by a taxi on the FDR just hours before showtime. With no backup and the board in panic, someone had turned to Charlotte with a nervous smile. You used to play, didn't you? She should have said no. Should have let them scramble. But pride, she'd learned, is a strange god. It'll let you burn rather than bow. Of course, she said. She locked herself in a forgotten rehearsal room with a dusty baby grand, trying to remember how her fingers used to move before fear stiffened them. Now she stood behind a heavy velvet curtain, stage lights bleeding through the crack, her hands trembling. She played 3.5 minutes of Bach, barely. The notes bled. Her left hand locked up. Her tempo faltered. When the final chord faded, the applause was polite, confused. Why is the CEO playing? Was that intentional? She left the stage before anyone could answer. Slipped through the loading dock heels, echoing against the concrete. That's when she heard it. A piano. Soft. Fragile. Played the way it was meant to be played. Each note like a breath. Each pause a heartbeat. She followed it. Behind the loading bay, tucked beneath a flickering bulb, was an old upright piano half forgotten in the chaos of event prep. And Daniel Brooks sitting before it, eyes closed, fingers gliding like they'd never left home. Charlotte froze. Not because he was playing, but because it sounded like he belonged inside the music. Like the music had waited for him. He looked up, startled. I thought you left, he said. I did, she whispered. But then you played. He stood slowly brushing dust from his sleeves. That was Bach, wasn't it? He nodded. Your choice tonight. You rushed the middle. Shoulders were too tense. Charlotte crossed her arms. So you were listening. You were shouting, he said gently. Not playing. The words stung not cruelly, but truthfully. You're not just a janitor, are you? She asked. No more than you're just a CEO, he replied. We all hide in uniforms. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was looking down at him. She was looking straight across. And what she saw was a man who hadn't lost his music. Just a man who had buried it for someone he loved. By Monday morning, it wasn't just a private moment anymore. A grainy 38-second clip had swept through every corner of Sonata Records first, through group chats, then Slack threads, then the company intranet. It had no title, just a caption. When the janitor plays a duet with the CEO, and the piano remembers. Charlotte watched the video on her office screen, frozen in place. She and Daniel sat at the grand piano in the lobby, her hands tracing out a tentative melody, his filling in the harmony like a second heartbeat. No sound except the music. No words. Just two people. Connected. Jennifer, her assistant, hovered beside her, pale and breathless. It's gone viral internally. Someone pulled the footage from the security feed. Reddit's picked it up. There's A thread. How many views? Charlotte asked. Over 200,000. Just from private shares. And the comments? Jennifer hesitated. Mixed. Some think it's romantic. Others are speculating. About power dynamics. About you. Charlotte didn't respond. She just stared at the still frame of her own face, mid-smile, turned toward a man the world had never seen before. 2 hours later, she found Daniel in the stairwell, wiping down handrails. They've turned this into something it's not, she said. They're calling it inappropriate, accusing us of using each other. Daniel didn't look up. And what do you think it is? She swallowed. I think it's the most honest thing I've felt in years. Finally, he looked at her. Then why do you already look like you're running from it? Charlotte didn't answer. Because deep down she knew. This wasn't just a moment that went viral. This was a truth the world didn't want her to live out loud. And she was about to find out what it would cost her. The boardroom smelled like cold steel and polished ego. Charlotte sat alone at the head of the 42-foot walnut table, back straight, hands folded. No jewelry, no makeup, no mask. One by one, the executives filed in. Last was Richard Hailher, Uncle Chairman of the board, and the man who had once tucked her into bed after her father's funeral. Today, he didn't even look her in the eye. We need to address the optics, he began, dropping a legal packet in front of her. We've prepared a statement. You'll step down quietly. Well, protect your severance, your public image. Frame it as a sabbatical. Philanthropy. Music outreach, maybe. Charlotte stared at him. You want me to lie? Richard's jaw clenched. We want to protect the company. She nodded slowly, then said clearly, It is romantic. The room went still. I'm not going to sanitize the truth to make you feel better, she said. I sat at that piano because I felt something real, and I'm not ashamed of it. Richard leaned forward, voice low. This could cost the company millions. Then maybe the company shouldn't be this fragile, she shot back. If one honest moment of humanity can break it, maybe it was broken already. You're making a mistake, he warned. No, she said, rising to her feet, I'm making a choice. And just like that, Charlotte Hale walked out not just of the boardroom, but out of the life she'd spent a decade building. She didn't take her nameplate. She didn't say goodbye. Some endings don't need punctuation, only purpose. And for the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't falling. She was finally returning to herself. It was the kind of message that made your heart forget how to beat. No warning, no goodbye. Just silence where there should have been a voice. When Charlotte knocked on Daniel's apartment door that night and no one answered, the neighbor across the hall barely looked up. He left in a rush, said something about the hospital. Charlotte didn't wait for more. She ran. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old fear. Harsh lights buzzed above her as she searched through corridors lined with too much waiting and not enough hope. Room 312. Pediatric wing. She found him there. Daniel sat beside a small hospital bed, one hand wrapped around his daughter's, the other trembling against his lips. Little Lily lay pale and fragile beneath oxygen tubes, her chest rising in shallow rhythm. A stuffed bear clung to her side like it was praying, too. I'm sorry, Charlotte whispered as she stepped into the room. Daniel looked up, his eyes hollow. She kept asking for the song. The one we started. Charlotte moved to him, knelt by the bed. Then let's finish it. They didn't need a piano. Just two sets of hands tapping gently against her blanket, weaving a lullaby out of breath and memory. Daniel's voice cracked as he began to hum low, trembling raw. Charlotte joined him. No harmony, just presence. And as the last note faded into the hum of machines, Lily's fingers twitched just slightly. She heard us, Charlotte said, voice breaking into a smile. Daniel nodded, too choked to speak. It wasn't a cure. Not yet. But in that room between two broken-hearted parents and a child who still had a fight left in her, something began to change. Not everything that heals comes in the form of medicine. Sometimes it comes in the form of music, unfinished, imperfect, but heard. 3 days later, Lily was stable enough to whisper again. She hadn't opened her eyes in nearly a week, but when she did, the first thing she said was, "Daddy? Can you play the song again?" Daniel's heart cracked and stitched itself back together in the same breath. Charlotte sat nearby, her hand resting on the edge of the bed. She hadn't left the hospital since that night-bringing noise-canceling headphones, coloring books, and stories she read like sheet music. She didn't try to fix everything. She just stayed. And somewhere in that quiet loyalty, the sterile white walls began to smell less like fear and more like home. By week's end, Lily was cleared for transfer to Boston, where a specialist team could offer her a real shot. Charlotte handled the logistics, called in favors, even found a cozy apartment nearby for Daniel to stay in during recovery. "It's not charity," she told him as they walked the garden path outside the hospital. "It's an investment in something real." He stopped, looked at her. "You know you're part of the melody now, right?" She smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd say that." Later that evening, over grilled cheese and soup, what Lily called fancy dinner because of the cloth napkins, the little girl looked between them and asked with childlike boldness, "Miss Charlotte, do you love my dad?" Charlotte nearly choked. Daniel froze. Lily shrugged. "You look at each other like the movies, but real." The laughter that followed wasn't just shared, it was rooted. The kind that comes from something earned in the fire, not painted on for show. And when Lily finally drifted off to sleep, curled against Daniel's chest, Charlotte stayed close. Not because she had to, but because she finally wanted to. And outside the hospital window, the moon seemed to rise just a little warmer that night, like even it had begun to believe in second chances. The apartment was quiet that morning. Too quiet for a Saturday. Daniel stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at a folded piece of paper left on the counter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Shaky block letters. Childish but determined. To Daddy from Lily. But serious this time. He opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Daddy, if I don't wake up after Boston, don't be sad. I know I was your song, but you're mine too. So if I can't finish our song, I want you to promise you'll play it for me one day. Not alone. In front of people. Where love can echo. Tell Miss Charlotte thank you for finding your music. And tell her I think she's pretty even when she's mad. P.S. I put something under the piano. It's for when you're ready. Love, Lily, the bravest girl you ever met." Daniel sank into the couch, heart-tight air thick around him. He turned toward the upright piano in the corner, still dusty, still waiting. He knelt beside it, reached beneath the warped panel. Inside, tucked inside a jewelry box that once belonged to her mother, was a small brass key. And a sticky note. "Use this when you feel like being loud again." With a doodle of him at a piano and a sun smiling above, Daniel laughed softly through his tears. He knew that key. It was the spare to Lincoln Chapella place whispered about in music circles, closed for years. But somehow he had a feeling it wasn't closed anymore, and someone had lit candles in the corners of that old wooden stage waiting for him to stop surviving and start playing. For Lily, for Charlotte, for the song that had never stopped echoing. Daniel didn't know what to expect when he unlocked the doors to Lincoln Chapel. He thought the room would be empty, forgotten. Instead, the air felt like it had been waiting. Candles flickered quietly along the edges of the stage. At the center sat a grand piano udged, but polished its lid open like an invitation. But what stopped him was the letter on the bench. Charlotte's handwriting. "I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. But maybe it doesn't need fixing, just music. Play for her, Daniel. Play like she's listening. Because she is. And if you play for me too, it'll be there. See." At 7:00 p.m. sharp, the doors opened. No press, no programs, just people. Friends, nurses, teachers, a few janitors, Jennifer from the office, even Margot without her boardroom armor. And quietly, in the back row, Charlotte. Daniel sat at the piano in silence. Then he played, not for perfection, not for applause, for Lily, for love, for the music he thought had left him. And when the final note faded, the room didn't erupt. It simply stood still, holding something sacred in its silence. Sometimes we wait our whole lives for someone to recognize what's still alive inside us. But healing doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being heard. Whether you're 8 or 80, it's never too late to return to the part of yourself you thought was gone. What about you? Have you ever picked up something you thought you'd lost, like music, a dream, or a part of yourself? Share it in the comments. Someone reading may need your courage today. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to our channel. There are more stories like this. Stories about second chances, quiet heroes, and the music that still plays in all of us. Stay kind, stay brave. And remember, some songs never end. They just wait for you to listen.